because the previous example shows how much that particular style of welfare program can disincentivize work, most modern welfare programs are designed differently, and the goal being to cause as little disruption as possible to the labor market and for the workers or the individual's decision to work. So for instance, in many states, probably all states, I'm not 100% sure on that, people can still work and receive welfare. But what they do is as they earn more money, their welfare receipts go down. So this removes that strong incentive to avoid work that we saw in the previous example, and it allows people to enter the labor force and to work, gaining skills and experience so that hopefully they can no longer need any assistance. So this example here is very similar to the last one, but it's slightly more complicated. But don't worry, a lot of this stuff is the same, so we'll walk through one piece at a time. So the individual budget line is still FE. In this case, they're earning $10 per hour. It goes from 110 hours of leisure here, if they're not working at all the way up to this point F here, if they choose engage in no leisure. This is the same slope, same everything as last time. This U0 here is the same original indifference curve, the utility function. And right here at point P, 70 hours of leisure, 40 hours of work is exactly the same as what we saw last time. So now an individual absent this program, so let's say before this goes into effect, they are able to, or if they're maximizing utility, doing point P here, so 70 hours leisure, 40 hours of work, and then engaging in this level of consumption, which is, I don't know, it's not labeled, so somewhere above $500. So now in this case, the individual can work and still receive the $500 grant. So unlike before, where we just had that $500 line out here, now we have a different budget line here. So the individual can get that $500 grant. They can still choose to work at that point, but it has a different slope. Now, the reason it has a different slope, this line HG, instead of being $10 like the first budget line, it's only $5, is because in this case, there is still a tax on someone that they're losing 50 cents of every dollar they earn as part of phasing out that welfare grant. So basically they have a tax rate of 50%. So now the slope is $5 per hour, only half of the $10 in wages that they're able to earn. So on their paycheck, the actual wage rate they receive is $10 per hour, but in reality, they're only keeping $5 because they have that $500 grant that they're losing some of. So it's as if they receive $5 per hour. Okay, so now how does their response to the welfare program compare to the previous example? They're still going to choose the mix that maximizes their utility. In this case, it lies along this curve U1. So here we have point G, or the endowment point, where they have that $500 grant. And then this line all the way up to H is the wages that they would receive. Point R here along this budget line is tangent to this utility curve U1. That's the best that they can possibly do. They're lying along the curve that maximizes their utility. So in this case, at point R, that corresponds to 100 hours of leisure. They're going to be above the $500 grant that they're receiving, but not by too much. And because they're engaging in 100 hours of leisure out of the 110 hours that we're considering in this week, they'll only be working 10 hours. So here we can still see that there's this labor disincentivizing nature of this welfare program. Despite the fact that it's designed to be less disruptive than the previous type of welfare grant, it still is discouraging people finding work. So instead of having people leave the labor force entirely, they're reducing their hours of labor, in this case from 40 hours to 10 hours. So in this example, this is a good way to look at an improvement in the original, or compared to the original type of welfare program. In this case, instead of having people leave the labor market entirely, or the labor force entirely, what they're doing is staying in the labor force and just reducing their hours worked. So they're still gaining this experience and building up skills that later they can use to work full-time jobs and to leave the program entirely. But at the same time, it's still causing this labor market distortion that's discouraging people from working like they would have in the past. Now, this is a simple version of the neoclassical model. We can add different types of income tax schemes, lump sum taxes. We can compare different utility functions. There's a whole lot of other things that we can do. But even with just this little bit of complexity, we can model human decision making, reach some interesting conclusions, and we can compare different policies.